Good morning, Guardians. Briar Rabbit here. I got a topic that has been kind of floating around in my brain for quite a while now. I would say at least 3 or 4 months. And Festival of the Lost has kind of put a pinpoint on this thing that has allowed me to kind of clarify what exactly my issue is. And it is an issue. It is a problem that I have with Destiny right now. And I think I've had it actually since the Taken King, since Update 2.0. The changes that were made in Destiny in Update 2.0, I'm not 100% on board with. And it wasn't apparent to me right away. In fact, it took me a long time to kind of figure out what these changes were that actually hurt the replayability of this game, especially on the PvE side. So for this video, I am going to be focused on PvE. I know Bungie likes to say that, there is no PvE or PvP side of Destiny. It's all one game, but I think in most players' minds, that's not really true. Either I'm shooting at AI or I'm shooting at other players, and depending on which one I'm shooting at, it's either PvP or PvE, right? So today I'm not going to be talking about PvP. I'm going to be talking about PvE, replayability, the way DLC has been released for Destiny, and the way the live team operates, and the way that live team events operate, especially in regards to the Eververse Trading Company. So let me start off by talking a little bit about Vanilla Destiny. Vanilla Destiny had some serious issues. There's no arguing that point, right? There were a ton of fairly major issues with Destiny 1. But for players who looked past those issues, what a lot of us found was a game that had a lot of very positive points, right? I love the actual gameplay of Destiny. I love the actual act of shooting in Destiny. I love the looter-shooter aspect of it as well. I loved the more I played, the more awesome loot I would get. And I kind of never knew when I was going to get that next awesome piece of gear. It was just fun to keep playing and keep collecting stuff. And of course, there was the Vault of Glass. The Vault of Glass was an incredible piece of content, and I think one that sold a lot of players on Destiny and then kept them playing, even though they could acknowledge that, yeah, Destiny has a lot of issues. And there's certain aspects of Vault of Glass that I think are quote-unquote fixed in later raids that may or may not have actually increased the replayability of the game and increased the reasons to keep playing the game. One of those was the extremely rare loot, and the other one is how good that loot was, and then a third one is what that loot was good for. Now, if you play a raid, a current raid, either King's Fall raid or Wrath of the Machine raid, you're going to get some loot that is mostly just usable inside of the raid. You're not going to be running it in PvP. You're not going to be running it in Nightfalls. In Nightfalls, you're mainly just going to be running whatever kind of weapon has the correct burn on it, whether it's solar burn or arc burn. And if it's arc burn, then you're almost guaranteed to be running the Zalo Supercell or a Fourth Horseman or something like that. You're not going to be running raid weapons. In year 1, that was very different, right? Is you would go into the Vault of Glass and you would hope to God that you got that lucky drop. Either you got a Vision of Confluence or a Fatebringer or whatever other weapon that maybe you haven't had yet, but you were super looking forward to. And then that weapon wasn't just good for the raid, it was often very good for other activities as well. The Fatebringer famously was good for just about every activity. Arguably, it wasn't the best hand cannon in PvP. I don't even think there is an argument there. But in PvE, it was great for Nightfalls, especially if you had Arc Burn on your Nightfall. It was great for Crota's End. So even though the Vault of Glass was not current content at the time, once people started running Crota's End, they started running Vault of Glass 2 just to get a Fatebringer. People who came into the game once Crota's End was the current raid went back and started playing Vault of Glass to get that Fatebringer. Vision of Confluence was the same way. Vision of Confluence was a wonderful weapon for PvE and for PvP. It's still a legendary weapon among the player base. And I think that two things have changed there. One is the weapons are too specialized now. The rewards are too specialized. The rewards are also too easy to get, and in some cases, too easy to pay for. A lot of my problems with Destiny are that once you have done a raid 1 or 2 times, you've basically got everything that you want to get out of that raid. As opposed to the Vault of Glass or even Crota's End, you ran that raid dozens of times, if not, 40 times, to try and get all of the loot that you wanted. Now, that was frustrating to a lot of people. People will vehemently disagree that the loot system is too generous now. People are going to be very upset that I have that to say. They're going to say, you're a top 1%, you play Destiny all day, every day, and that's not, frankly, true. But that's what people are going to say. And that, it's a 1%er problem that you run out of stuff to do too fast. But I played just as much Destiny in year 1 that I play now, but I always had a drive. I always had a compelling thing that was out there looking at me, whether it be exotics, going into the Vault of Glass or Crota's End and opening an exotic chest, hoping for that Monte Carlo or that Hawk Moon. Now, exotics are much different. It's a change that I really didn't like with Destiny 2.0, where they changed exotics to be offered through 3 coins, which you could basically farm. The specialness of getting an exotic, the thrill of getting a new exotic, has very much been minimized. And that's not a change that I agree with in Destiny 2.0. I also don't agree with the way that Nightfalls have been nerfed in Update 2.0. Now, this is old news, but back in year 1, Nightfalls were, beat it or wipe and go back to orbit and start from scratch. Nightfalls were high risk, high reward. You had a good chance of getting an exotic out of a Nightfall when you completed it, but you also had a good chance of getting killed, your whole fire team wiping, and you have to start from scratch. You have to go all the way out to orbit and start from scratch on that Nightfall. Now there are checkpoints in Nightfalls. Nightfalls are much easier. You don't feel like you need to get that perfect loadout for a Nightfall that you did in year 1. They've very much been nerfed, and to me that's kind of a shame because they were one of the reasons you wanted to have some of the best gear in Destiny. Now that Nightfalls don't have that anymore, it takes away some of the endgame content. Some of that stuff that was really exciting about year 1 is no longer all that exciting. The raid weapons being usable in all sorts of content, that's kind of gone too. Bungie has clearly got a different design philosophy now, is they don't want the raid weapons to be, the best weapons in the game. They want them to be the best guns in the game for the raid. But once you have them, once you've got all of the raid weapons, why do you want to go back into the raid? Unless you just enjoy going into the raid, maybe you like to help newer players out, or you just enjoy, that type of activity, which is fine. There's no actual reason to go back into the raid once you've gotten all of the loot out of it, right? In year 1, that was a little bit different. You could keep going back because the weapons and the armor were much more rare, so it would just constantly give you a reason to keep going back into that raid. Week after week, you couldn't wait to get into that raid, and hopefully you'd get that Black Hammer or that Fatebringer or that Vision of Confluence. Whatever weapon you were looking for, it was always dangling by a string. It was always this carrot on a stick that doesn't really exist in Destiny anymore. Even if you get the raid weapon you're looking for, the only time you're really going to use it is during the raid, which is kind of weird. Also, the structure of Destiny's DLCs has changed dramatically since year 1. In year 1, right off the bat, we got the Dark Below DLC. It was, a small DLC. A lot of people regard it as the worst content in Destiny, and I would somewhat disagree. I thought it was fun to get another raid right away, as opposed to with the Taken King, where we got one raid for an entire year. In Destiny Year 1, we got 2 raids, and we got the Prison of Elders. In Destiny Year 2, we got 1 raid and a reskin of the Prison of Elders, the Challenge of Elders, which wasn't really all that much different, and to a lot of players like myself, got very boring very fast. What we did start getting was live events. But live events are very different from DLC Especially, I would say, with this most current Festival of Lost, instead of giving us a reason to play the game, they're much bigger on giving us a reason to pay for items. And I don't really have a problem with paying for cosmetic items. I don't have an issue with that, frankly, at all. I don't have any kind of issue with Bungie making money. I want them to make money. I want them to be able to get the best developers. I want them to be paid very well for what they do. However, I also want the player base to have something to play. And with Festival of the Lost, there's very little of that something to play. There's a lot of new content that came with Festival of the Lost. There's new masks, there's new emotes, there's all sorts of new stuff. There's new sparrows, there's new ghost shells, there's a bunch of really amazing stuff. But it doesn't have anything to play. It has one really simple quest, or two really simple quests, one in the Crucible and one in PvE. They're done very quickly, and then unless you delete a character, you're done, and anything you didn't get from completing your quests, you're going to have to then pay for using a somewhat shitty microtransaction system, which I don't really like. So to me, the difference between year 1 and year 2 is, or year 3, is replayability and the promise of new content. In year 1, we were constantly looking forward to new content. Right after the release of Destiny, we knew the Dark Below was going to release closely on its heels. And then we were looking forward to House of Wolves, and then we were looking forward to The Taken King. In year 2, we didn't know what to look forward to. Suddenly, there was just emptiness. There was nothing to look forward to. And the content that we had was far less replayable than it was in year 1. Nightfalls were not as difficult. The weapons you got out of Kingsfall were not useful in a lot of other situations besides the raid itself. And frankly, we're not that good in the raid. And you got them very, very quickly. Once you completed the raid 2 or 3 times, it was very likely that you had all the weapons and all the armor out of Kingsfall raid. That's the same thing as Wrath of the Machine. I've completed the hard mode 3 times. I've gotten a full set of hard mode armor. I have every weapon except for the sniper rifle. It's just, there's not a lot of compelling reasons to go into that raid because those weapons aren't really all that good for Nightfalls or other PvE content. Certainly not in the same way that Vault of Glass weapons were. So it's just, there's been a shift in how replayable content is in year 1 compared to year 2 and year 3. And I'm not really on board with it. So thanks for hanging out with me, guys. That's going to do it for this video. Hit that like button if you like the video. Hit subscribe if you're new to the channel. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.